I've been criticising the Tories a lot in the past, but I've realised maybe they're just confused, not the evil, corrupt bastards I originally thought. For example, Boris Johnson introduced the ULEZ low emission zone in London, but they campaigned against it in a recent by election. They criticise Labour for accepting a donation from Just Stop Oil, but think accepting millions from the oil and gas industry themselves is okay. They say we have the cleanest water, which we don't, but continue to let water companies fill our rivers and seas with shit. Looking at you, Theresa Coffey. When the economy is shit, they blame the Bank of England or anyone else saying it's out of their control. But if things look like they're improving, they say it's all down to their policies. Looking at you, Jeremy Hunt. They criticise teacher strikes when kids lose a day's education, but shut schools down for royal events. They say there's no money for education, but recently announced an increase in what MPs get paid if they lose their seat or resign, up to £17,000 just for resigning. Looking at you, Nadine Dorries. They say there's no money for public services, but they wrote off billions spent on PPE during the pandemic, mainly given to friends and cronies of the Tory party who had no experience in the field. Looking at you, Greg Hands and Michelle Mone. They say they support the NHS, but won't pay staff properly and expand in private healthcare. They think paying public sector workers will lead to inflation, but huge increases for FTSE 100 bosses who already earn millions won't. They promote privatisation, but still control the rail companies in the background to keep wages down and reduce services. They say poor people fiddle the system, but think rich people make inadvertent mistakes. Looking at you, Rishi Sunak, they tell us we're in it together, but they set up businesses and pay taxes abroad. Looking at you, Jacob Rees-Mogg, benefit claimants are vilified with millions spent hunting them down. Tax dodgers are given positions of power. Looking at you, Nadine Zahawi, they tell us they're green champions, but continue with new mining, oil and gas exploration, and massive subsidies to the oil and gas sector. They tell us we can live on meals for 30p, but they happily take highly paid second jobs when they should be representing their constituents. Looking at you, Lee Anderson. They criticise people for not being productive, but Nadine Dorries hadn't attended Parliament for over a year when she resigned, and Boris Johnson earned millions from a second job, ignoring his parliamentary duties the second he was ousted as Prime Minister. They expect us to wrap up and cut down on energy use over winter, but dodgily claim their energy costs on expenses. Looking at you, Suella Braverman. They impose sanctions on Russia, but Rishi Sunak's wife's company continues to trade there. They criticise P&O bosses for sacking staff and hiring cheap labour, and then gave them a £230 million contract. They criticise the BBC over Philip Schofield and Hugh Edwards, but haven't commented on GB News' Dan Wootton. They criticised Keir Starmer for having a curry in lockdown, but defended Boris Johnson, who attended and encouraged multiple parties in Downing Street. They talk about levelling up, but Rishi Sunak was filmed saying he'd move funding to better off areas, away from poorer areas. They supported Boris Johnson, openly lying in Parliament and outside, and then were happy to see Labour MP Dawn Butler thrown out of Parliament for saying he was a liar. They give asylum to Rwandans because their country isn't safe, but at the same time, they want to send migrants there. They say asylum seekers should stay in the first safe country they reach, but didn't expect Ukrainians to stay in Poland. They said we'd protect the 20,000 Afghans who helped us, but some could now be sent to Rwanda. They complain about the cost of migrants, but when they were given a way to halve those costs, they rejected it. They scream patriotism while running the country into the ground and making us an international laughingstock. And finally, they seem most confused when they speak for everyone in the country. I'll tell you what, they don't fucking speak for me.